I don't follow any format really. But yeah, you were saying that you were shot 4 times, and that's why you're wearing body armor.
That is correct. Yes, I have been. So I joined the Army when I was 20 years old. I was taken to. I went through the whole processing center, and this happened when I was in Washington State. And this was actually November 14th of 2001 when I signed up. Is right after 9/11. As we all know, and there's a lot of evidence to show that 9/11 was an inside job.
Of course.
And the reason why it was an inside job is because the financial system in the United States was supposed to switch over to the gold standard. And it was about everything was going to change. And instead of them changing it, and instead of the IRS, because the IRS was expiring in 2001, actually, I think it was in 2000, it was supposed to expire. And instead of allowing that to happen in the United States, they formulated a plan to create an enemy, and the enemy was terrorism. And they decided they were going to make an enemy out of Middle East groups who were actually trained by the United States government, who were trained by the CIA, trained by the Mossad to be able to fight the Russians. So it was actually, the whole thing was it was just misdirection and miscommunication is what it was. And when the two towers went down, that's when everybody got distracted by terrorism and by a false enemy. Instead of the United States government taking the blame and saying, hey, we're trying to change this, they went around and subversively made an enemy so everybody could see an enemy. And Project Mockingbird was a part of all of that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm sure people watching this know that 9/11 was anything but what they say it was. Is multiple things like a ritual sacrifice, or maybe like a test of the level of the credulity of the masses and stuff. Also, like a way for them to open portals to lower planes. But
right.
I guess at the time you were young and weren't red pill yet. So, and also you had received dreams, whether they were implanted or not, of serving in the military. Do you think that they were suggesting for you to enroll that way?
Interesting that you should say that, because yes, I did have a dream when I was 17 of being in the Army. And in the dream, I was in formation. I was in full battle, full BDUs, just like it was in the early 2000s, in the late 90s, like the battle dress uniform. And I woke up from that dream knowing that I was going to join the Army. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I can trace my family military history back to the Civil War. And from there on forward to World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and my father who served in Vietnam, in the Vietnam conflict as well. So I was a patriot. I absolutely believed in America. I believed in what she stood for. I believed in the Constitution, and I still to this day believe in the Constitution. Absolutely 100%. In what it stands for, and in the fact that people have the right to choose for themselves who's going to govern over them. And in another way, in another sense, I believe that people can self-govern themselves if they didn't have the controls that are in place now over them in a fight for resources, in the crime and justice system, in the jobs and the financial overlord system we have that's continues now over us by off-world overlords of, let's say, the Mars Germans and the ICC. When I joined the Army when I was 20 years old, I went into the military entrance and processing station in Spokane, Washington. I did my ASVAB test, and what my recruiter told me is they, at the time, because of the whole going overseas, and we had invaded. We had gone into Afghanistan, or we were going into Afghanistan at the time. And he said, well, we're really not taking GEDers, because I have a homeschooling background. And luckily enough, I scored high enough on my ASVAB that they were taking GEDers, is what he told me. So I scored a 56. I had my physical examination at the military entrance processing station in Spokane, Washington. And then what you do after that is you go over your armed forces contract. Now I sat down, I went into the back of the office, and usually they have a sergeant major, which is one of the highest enlisted ranks in the United States Army, go over your contract with you. Instead of sergeant major that was sitting there with the paperwork to go over my contract and explain everything in detail and add anything that I wanted to do, such as airborne school, special forces contract, ranger contract, you got to put that all in before you go into the service. You got to talk to them about it. Instead of a sergeant major, it's actually a major that was there, an actual officer. And he had said to me, and the paperwork that I had sat down to sign was about that thick. Normally, the paperwork when you sit down to sign your armed forces contract is about that thick. So that was kind of the first thing that I noticed. And he said to me, he specifically said to me, he said, you want to serve your country, how would you like to serve your planet? And he went into description about Solar Warden and what it was about, and pretty much in detail what I'd be doing if I had said yes to that. And of course I said yes. I signed all the paperwork, and we spent probably 2 to 3 hours going over everything and talking about it and me signing. I didn't leave for basic training up until it's called a delayed entry program. So I was in the United States military, and I was considered a private at the time from November on till January, when I flew out of Seattle, Washington down to Georgia. When I got to Georgia, they had a bus at the airport to pick us up, and this was in Atlanta. And we bussed over to Fort Benning, and they put us in holding. Holding basically means you're waiting for the next cycle of the class of the basic training of infantry to graduate, so the next group of people can go through. It's called a cycle, is what it's called. And so I was there for about 2 weeks. We got our uniforms, we got our PT clothes, we got our Class A's, we were fitted for our Class A's. We did our PT test, we got our injections, which we got our finances set up. I mean, everything and anything that we needed to get set up before we went into our cycle. So my basic training unit, and I actually have pictures of this if people need evidence. I will be posting a lot of this on my Facebook page, by the way,
Okay.
including classified military documents that I have, because we're done holding back. I'm gonna tell it all, and I'm not afraid anymore. They can't hurt me. I've been shot, I've been stabbed, I've been blown up, basically. I've been poisoned, heavily targeted, and some of this happened while I was in the military, and some of this happened also in my civilian life as well. The basic training unit that I was a part of was Alpha 219. We were called the Dogs of War. There were 4 platoons in my basic training cycle, and we were first platoon, is what we were. And it was Alpha 219, and it's worth mentioning that my former wife's birthday is also February 19th of 1981. Mm-hmm. She was in the comments when we can go to that soon in another interview.
Sure.
At some point. So I went through my cycle, went through basic training. There was some really weird things that happened while I was in basic training. In my other interviews, I kind of outed the Black Ops community in the fact that they recruit out of basic training, out of infantry cycles. Special Forces does the same thing. They take your family military history into consideration. They take your DNA into consideration. Like if you have a long line of warriors per se, that is actually hardwired into your DNA. For protection, instincts, I mean, anything and everything that you need to be a warrior, that's already in you from your family lineage. And and the fact, what's that?
So that's why they look into the family military history. So you have that ingrained in your DNA. Do they also look for other qualities like royal?
Bloodline, absolutely. Bloodline is huge in the military. Like people think that you just, you sign up and you go in. No, they look at everything, and especially because I was project before. And I'd been at Montauk. I was a part of the Mars Marines. I mean, I've done quite a bit of projects from age 0 on up. So they looked at that. Now, at the time, I don't think I had the memories because I'd been here just on Earth for 20 years, and I didn't have a lot of my memories. So I was just like, I was gung ho. I had a lot of I mean, I had glasses. I had some hearing loss when I was a kid. I was like really, really sick as a kid. So the opportunity to join the military and to make something of myself and to prove to my dad and to my family that I was worth something was like the biggest thing to me, was to prove I could do it. And that's part of also why I did it. So while I was at basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, they were looking, they were watching me the whole time, and I didn't know it at the time. My senior drill sergeant, his name was Sergeant First Class White at the time. He was actually in Mogadishu. He wasn't actually in the film Black Hawk Down, but he was there when it went down. He was an Army Ranger, Airborne Ranger, and he was a part of the mortar battalion that supported the entire operation there. I believe they used 81 millimeter mortars for that. That's actually battalion mortars. Those are big enough to land a pretty big size hole in anything that you shoot them at. My MOS in the military. So when I got there, originally the MOS that they give you, you don't actually get until you have your 8 weeks in after you graduate basic training, and then you go to AIT, which is advanced infantry training, and OSET training as well. And so what they did with us at the time, after our 8 weeks of basic, they split my unit, they took 11 Bravos, which is just a standard rifleman, and they split other specialties off there, which were for me because my senior drill sergeant, his mortars, Staff Sergeant Connolly, he was also mortars, and my other drill sergeant, he was also at mortars, and it was an airborne ranger. All these guys either had been in combat, first of all, or they were airborne rangers. Actually, all three of them were airborne rangers, come to think of it. And they split us off into 11 Charlies, and which is a mortarman. And some strange things that happened as well. So I remember getting sick when I was there, and instead of going to sick call, which was standard, and what they do is they separate you and they quarantine you, I got sick, and I was coughing, had a runny nose, and it was late at night, and I believe it was my drill sergeant that came in. He said, "Hey, Saber, you gotta go to isolation to quarantine." And I hadn't gone to sick call. These are my memories. I hadn't gone to sick call, and they took me down, which our barracks were here, and there was kind of a hill that goes down. And also, a lot of people, veterans that watch this, they know that at Fort Benning, that's where they do the airborne training. Now, I remember specifically having airborne in my contract, but somehow my memories got erased and wiped of actually going through it, which was in a recent last couple of years. I had a recall of actually going through airborne training at Fort Benning. So the sick call that they sent me to quarantine was actually airborne holding, which was very strange. It was kind of a mix up of memories, and I think cover memories as well. And I remember going in there, and there were not sick people there. There was a few sick people, but there were bunks, and they were just regular people waiting to go to airborne holding. But somehow I was sick and in quarantine with perfectly healthy people, which made no sense. Another thing I remember about that was we all sat down one night and we watched the movie Varsity Blues, which I heard also has encoding in it as well, and it has some trigger stuff for projects. Blues meaning the color blue, and there's some other coding in there as well. I don't remember how long I was there for in airborne holding. Usually it's about 1 to 2 weeks before the next cycle goes through, so you can go into your cycle of airborne training. I remember the mock plane that we jump out of, and you jump out, you say airborne, and you land with your feet and knees together, you kind of twist and you fall down, because when you're the T-10 Charlies that they use, that was the parachutes, you were still landing about 15 miles an hour, and you could easily break your knees and your ankles if you didn't land right. And so that's why you put your feet and knees together. So that was the first thing. The second thing was during fire guard, you had this desk that you would be sitting at. And on this desk, I remember there were these magazines. They had a couple of pictures of some chicks, like, from the, just for some motivation for the guys, just to be like, and they also had these cards that were laminated that had weapon systems on them. And in particular, so you could be reading the magazines, which I think they had 1 or 2 entertainment magazines, or you could be reading the weapons cards, the manuals that they had. And they had the Carl Gustav rocket launcher, I remember. They had the Stryker vehicle. which was at the time I think was just coming out. They also had strangely enough, they had a laser guided mortar system. And this, mind you, this was in 2000. This was like 2002, actually. Because I went to basic training. My date of active service date was January 8th of 2002. Now, this laser guided mortar system, it was all white and it had red highlights on it. And laser guided mortars and laser guided systems, and they had been around for a while, but this is a relatively new system. And I don't even know if this was released to the public at the time. So I believe I was looking at classified material. Mm-hmm. And they noticed that while I was looking at all this stuff, they were processing everything and they're watching everybody in order to recruit them, let's say, out of the regular basic training, out of regular army into either special forces or black ops. Now, I remember, this is another interesting thing that happened as well. The reading material that you were allowed in basic training, for the most part, wasn't civilian. I remember my friend, he was in another unit. He was in the same complex that I was, but he was in another training platoon. And he said that he was reading Lord of the Rings, which was weird because the BX wasn't too far from us and that wasn't allowed reading. And somehow I remember reading that, but I also remember picking up the Special Operations Group. It's a SOG book. It's called SOG, and reading about SOG. And this was the Special Operations Groups formed, I believe it was in '68 when the Green Berets first formed, when Kennedy first authorized the Green Berets to be formed for special operations in Vietnam to basically counter the VC's guerrilla tactics, because we'd really never seen anything like that before, and we were losing really hardcore. So we had to come into unconventional warfare is what it was. And so I read the Special Operations Group, and in particular, I remember this operation that they had using claymores, the M18 Claymore, which has now been banned by the Geneva Conventions because of its absolute savagery and what it does to any target, any live target, any armored or unarmored. What it do? It will literally just turn someone into a blood spray, and there'll be nothing left to pick up afterwards. Oh. You can read the manual; it's online. I won't go into details, but in particular, this Special Operations Group operation, I remember there was a convoy going down a road, and what they did is they buried these claymores into the ground face up. So when the convoy came by, everything went up. And I remember that to this day, that specific story. That was another trigger for me to realize that things were normal in basic training. Another thing that wasn't normal in basic training for me was, there was a rumor going around basic training in my unit. This is very interesting as well, of a kid who Special Forces was taking out of everyday basic training and teaching him martial arts and teaching him how to fight. And he would go out every day with Special Forces. I don't remember which group it was, but these probably were recruiters. And now that I look back, I know that was actually me that they were taking out of my class. Yep, absolutely. Black Ops was coming in and taking me out. And taking me, there's an underground hospital complex at Fort Benning, Georgia. This underground hospital complex is where they take specialized selected assets for off-world training and off-world preparation for solar warding. And so, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. One of the things I wanted to do with this recording is to maybe add some order to your timeline of your various, let's say, services or time loops or whatever. When you say you were already time looped starting at an early age, why were they still investigating you and looking into? Does that mean that they only realized your potential when you enrolled at 20, and then they returned and somehow time traveled? Or were you already a genetic experiment from birth? So these are just latecomers to the game.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, okay, let's go back to that. That's really good. I'm glad you brought that up, Daniel. So originally, I was a contract between the Mars Germans and the Draco Empire. I was born on Mars. I was made in an artificial womb. At the time, I am one of Old Man's kids, by the way, from Montauk, and I am a genetic experiment. I am enhanced 3D I have implants, I have enhanced muscle groups and enhanced nerve groups. I have denser bones than most people do. I have a extremely dense skull that can take a beating. I do have titanium ribs. I have segments on the side of my body here where the ribs don't attach, and that is to be able to flex an armor so you don't get crushed.
I see. But how much are you like a result of your biological parents, and how much of the old man?
Okay. All right. So let me go back to. I'll take you back. We'll talk about this. This happened on Mars. So what they did is they essentially Old Man took his sperm. He's a sperm donor. And they took an egg from a Thuban queen. Her name is Murata. She's of the third house of the Thuban Draco Empire. And there's a lot of people that know about her in projects. He was actually the liaison between the Draco Empire and the Mars Germans when they went on the moon. And she is my mother. I would say she's actually my birth mother, because the mother here is not my birth mother. She's a surrogate, and I wasn't born on this planet. I was born on Mars.
But you also weren't properly born. You were grown, right?
I was grown in an artificial womb on Mars. Yep. So what they did is they took different genetic material. They had Old Mans, they had Marathas. So throughout history, they have these gods that supposedly that died, right? So they actually had genetic material from certain entities that they found and or were donated to make Project Iva's children. And these entities I have Tyr's DNA, which is I have giant DNA. I have Lilith's DNA. I have Inanna's DNA. I have ancient Lyran DNA. And of course, I have Alpha Draconian DNA from my mother. So I'm an experiment, man. Like they didn't know I was going to survive. Like they had no idea. It was kind of like a shock. So when I was born, I was actually given over to the Mars Germans to be raised in their society. And I was given to a surrogate mother, to a wet nurse. And I was with them for about 7 years. And in those 7 years, I was educated to the hilt in the Mars ways, in the Mars German ways, top to bottom.
Right. But I'm sure you still had a human template, and the other ones were just as much as they could cram in.
Okay, so the Mars Germans are a human template. That's the first thing. My father here, they also put his DNA in me. My dad here is CIA, and he was part of Project Phoenix, and for Area 51 as well. There's a few people that remember him being in projects and being a part of projects. So in a way, I have his DNA in order to be here to look like everybody else, but inside. And my abilities, they're nothing like humans at all in any way, form. I mean, yes, I can have kids with regular people, but it's just enhanced, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. And going back to the old man, I'm sure not a lot of people know actually who he is. Could you add some definition there?
Yeah, I'd be happy to expand on that. So, Old Man is actually an extension of Enki, who is one of the 3 Anunnaki brothers who came here and made what we are today and made our society what we're today over 500,000 years ago. He put himself into projects because the 3 brothers, they're basically in a fight over the planet and who's going to be in charge. And it's all politics. And it's Enlil. And there's another brother, and there's not a lot of information on the other brother other than we call him Set. Death, the god of death himself. That's Set. And Lil is Yahweh, who set up the Abrahamic religions in order to control the planet, in order to put a spell over us and to put up the veil so we couldn't see what's really going on outside of our 3D world.
Did you put this together in the here and now, or are you speaking from memories of SSP? Or
this is here and now. I mean, we have found Old Man variations of Old Man in different people. He's just kind of, I don't know if you call him a many-faced guy. What's that?
He body snatches or takes over or what?
I think it's just an integration of his soul going into different human cycles and different human bodies. Old Man in particular at Montauk, I mean, he made us in order to go in and infiltrate the programs and the projects in order to collapse them and bring them down. That is the reason for Project Ibis.
Really?
For his kids anyways, in order to take down Set, in order to take down Enlil, and to take down projects, infiltration units. That's what we were.
And these three brothers were Anunnaki of the Nibiru.
That is correct. Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, Anuk. Yep. And
Enki
is basically my dad. Like, and there's quite a few people who Enki is their dad as well in projects. Old Man.
And he was in competition with his two brothers, and the other two brothers are behind much of the programs, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. You got Project Monarch, and there's also something called Project Traveler, which is one of Set's opposing programs for Ibis, because Ibis was to bring in basically entities, souls of entities, and souls of ancient gods into human form, reborn, if you will, into enhanced bodies in order to fight the brothers and what they throw at everybody and what they throw in projects at people. Yep.
So the Old Man is a very controversial figure, but you would argue that he's the lesser of the three evils.
I would say he's still an asshole, and he still used us. You better believe he used us. I mean, he raped his kids. You know, he fucked with us. He fucked with everybody. He isn't innocent by any standard in any way, shape, or form. Now, at some point along the line, I think he began to see what was good and what was bad, and I think he began to change, maybe just a little bit, in order to be able to take down the projects and the time loops. And I think there was some judgment that was passed on him in the Anunnaki Council for this, and in the councils.
Do you know the relationship between the Anunnaki Nibiruans and the Draconians? Is it true that they're basically subservient and doing the Draco's bidding?
Okay, so the two brothers, Set and Enlil, yes. And this goes back to the Lyran Wars, because the original Nibiruans, they were more Lyran than Dracos. And they crossbred with them and became more Draco. And in doing so, they became a little bit more, I wouldn't say aggressive, but more like the Draco, and then they were more of a conquering type species. And that's why they came here to our system in order to, their world was dying. But, universal law, you're not supposed to interfere in the development of the species at all, period, ... That's a no-go. So they violated that contract. And when they did that and they came to this planet to take our gold, originally they brought their own people to work, but the environment was too harsh for them. And so they crossbred themselves with the native species here. And that's where you get the story of Adam and Eve and a whole lot more in the Bible.
So your body is also, if I understand correctly, not from Earth. It was originally designed, so-called, on Mars, and it's a clone. Is that correct?
This is my original template. Now, how they made me and what they did to me, there was a whole, I did have clones. Yes, I did have clones, and yes, I was made into a chimera. But this is my template. I have scars to prove that. I have memories, and I have other people as well that when they see pictures of me, they remember me from other places, and this is exactly what they remember this face.
I see. So were you yourself from birth, your soul? You're always meant to be this elaborate project, or were you also what they call a walk-in?
I had a soul contract. I was a walk-in to come into projects, and it's gonna sound crazy as shit, but there's a lot of evidence to back it up. So I had a soul contract with, now there was what we call the Valkyrie, or the Valkyrie topside that the Mars Germans they interacted with. And the Valkyrie are actual, it's a warrior female. It is a female warrior faction from outer space. And my original soul contract was with the Valkyrie to come here to infiltrate projects, to stop the Lyran wars, to be a part of disclosure and us overthrowing our parents, the Anunnaki, the Anuk, that have enslaved humanity and have enslaved this planet and have harmed the galaxy and the solar system for a very, 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 very long time.
Right. But before we get to that, let's recap on the type of mix that you are genetically. I think you're also part werewolf yourself.
Oh yeah. Okay, let's go there. So yeah, I was part of a blood ritual, and okay, so they selected many different children in projects at Montauk. I mean, Montauk was a huge, massive, just fuck up experiment for a lot of reasons. And I won't go into details because that's going to take too long. But a lot of old man's kids, we have time points on our spine, and those are able to be hooked into different technology and quantum computers in order to time travel. So what they did is they time traveled us back to the Lyran Wars in order to basically create events back then, us then, to a point here now in order to create a loop. So part of me going back, so one of the things they did to me when I went back, I was 7 years old, and they took me back to the Lyran Wars, to this particular, I don't know what planet it was. There was a species of werewolves, a type of wolf, and these weren't from Earth at all. I don't even know what part of the galaxy they were from, but they were very, they weren't benevolent in any way, shape, or form. So they're about 9.5, 10 feet tall, and the scariest looking faces in a horror movie of a werewolf that you can think of. That's what they look like. They were all wearing red robes that went over their heads, completely covered from head to toe. Only their hands were showing, and their hands, they were like this. They look like ours, but they were furry and they were huge, and they had massive sharp claws on them. Of course, there was 12 of them. They took me into a cave, and there was a ritual sword and a stone goblet, and inside this cave on this planet, God knows where it was, there was a depression in the floor with two steps going down, and it went about down, I would say, as close to like 3 feet deep in this depression, and it was about 6 feet in diameter. And they put me in the middle of this, and 6 of them, they stripped me from head to toe, took all my clothes off, and then they made tiny incision cuts with the sword all over my body, so I was just bleeding. So I wasn't dying, I wasn't bleeding enough to have significant blood loss, but I was bleeding pretty heavily. And then what they did, the first 6, they took the sword and they slit their wrists, and they started bleeding all over me. They started rubbing their blood all over me, washing me in their blood, and then they bled the rest of themselves into the pit, is what they did. They filled the pit up with their blood. The next 6 came in, and what they did, instead of slitting their wrists, they slit their hands, and they started pouring their blood into the goblet, and they made me drink it.
Wow.
And then they began an incantation. They began to chant, and they baptized me in the blood, and they held me down there until I was drowning. And the whole thing was, if the ritual took, then I would be resurrected and I would survive. And if it didn't, then I'd be dead, and I'd just be there laying in the pool. And I came out, and I came out something different. I don't remember specifically transforming right away, but the cross between the Lyran DNA that I already had and the wolf DNA created something that I guess you could say maybe hadn't seen before. But the whole point was, because I was inducted into the Draco Empire at 7 years old from the Mars Germans, was to make a beast that they could use to do whatever they wanted with, to campaign, to be a liaison. Originally, they had designed me to be a liaison to invade Earth from the Thuban Draco Empire. And of course, I spat in their face, and this is the result of that. Right. But what the creation out of that was the template for what people would say is Saber-tooth in the comics today. And I'm not saying that to brag or to boast or to toot my own horn. I'm just saying this is what it was, and this is what I remember what it was. And there's other people that remember that as well.
Interesting. And you also said that there was ship-to-ship combat in the Lyran Wars, and then you were fighting on zero gravity on ships, and that it caused a lot of losses, that war, and was very costly.
Extremely. I mean, originally it was a history lesson. We time traveled back, but we got involved, and because of politics, we started fighting in the Lyran Wars themselves. I have a particular recall, and I don't know if this was a past life or this was actually me on Lyra when it was destroyed, but I remember Lyra and how it went. And the whole planet wasn't destroyed. It still exists today, but they've been working on it for millions of years in order to restore it. There's only one gate left, and that was the 12th gate. There were 12 gates on Lyra. All of them were destroyed except for one. One particular. I remember in particular, like you said, I remember being on a ship. I don't remember what kind of ship it was. I remember flying on a ship, and we had our 0G suits on, our combat suits, our armor. And I mean, when you're going, this is sublight speed. So, but in space, there's no drag. You're just going. You just, I mean, you match the speed of something else. It's just like, hey, it's static, basically, is what it is. So we'd hopped on board the ship, and I remember the ship. I'm going to tell you the shape. It was kind of shaped like this, from prow to the back like this. But on top had this metal structure on it, and I don't remember what the metal structure was for. But we jumped on board the ship, and we engaged our gravity boots, of course, our mag boots, in order to grip onto the metal of the ship so we wouldn't be all over the place in case something happened. And we started fighting aliens to get on board. That's what I remember. I don't remember what these aliens were, but they could breathe the vacuum of space. They were more like chimera, and they were different colors. There was purple ones, I think there was blue ones, and there was red ones. And they'd swarmed the top of the ship because they knew we were going to come on board and try to take the ship from them. So we started fighting them.
Or was this a close combat, or was it with?
This was hand-to-hand close combat. Yes, it was.
But you had to wear some spacesuit or something.
We did have to wear spacesuits. We had to wear, combat armor. Absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the particular type of combat armor we were wearing, but it was very close fitting, articulated joints, the whole bit, and it was sealed up as well for 0G fighting.
So, because of how damaging this war was, that was also the inception of the whole Time Wars in general, and also the organizations that govern time. Like, could you go over some of them?
You have the TVA, which is the Time Variance Authority. It started out as a Time Corps, is how it started out as. And from there, it split off into different factions because there were two sides. You had the Orion Syndicate, the Black Dragons that came through in the Dark Universe that started the wars. Which now, I mean, technically be the Orion Empire, but I think the Orion Empire, they actually split off from the Orion Empire as well. I mean, the Time Corps, then it was a TVA, then you have the Bureau of Time Intelligence. I think there's a Time Transcendence Authority as well. And then you have Earthside Associates, which would be one in particular called L3 as well. That's a part of all of this. And they have bases all over the place. In particular, I used to work for the BTI, the Bureau of Time Intelligence, and they have a satellite that's over our planet right now that phases in and out of time and space. And the way that they used us to time travel is that they would hook up they have a quantum computer that does all the calculations for the jumps, and they'd hook up our time points either wirelessly or hardwired into a pod, and we would jump that way, and that's how we time travel.
Wow. What else can you say about, I mean, have you heard about the dark universe of the Draco? Is it?
Yep. Yeah, I know exactly about that. Do you want me to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, please.
We'll go into a little bit of history. So what was told to me and what was downloaded to me was the Lyrans, they were they were raising their consciousness. They were ascending. I mean, these guys were going like, you talk about like 3D, 4D, 5D. These guys were like on the seventh dimension of like just going higher, man. They were connecting to source. I mean, the technology that they had wasn't based upon artificial intelligence, or even, I don't think it was digital. It was something completely different. It was more like biotechnology, and it had to do with stars. It had to do with planets, the cores of planets. I mean, these guys had it going on, man, and it was thriving, and the universe was popping off with all this. There was very little to no conflict at this time in our universe. It was about life, dude. It was about thriving. It was about love. There's still conflicts, border wars and things like that, but nothing to the extent that happened when the Draco invaded. So what had happened, how the Draco got here, is they had darkened their universe. It was a black universe, black suns. This is where the Black Sun Society came from, was actually from the idea of the Black Draco. And if you go into movies like the Chronicles of Riddick, that the particular enemy that they fought, that's kind of a representation of what they do to people and what they do to suns to create the dark universe. It's dark matter energy. I mean,
they suck out the energy.
Yep, exactly. It exists in our universe. It exists everywhere, but they figured out a way to harness it. So they had killed their suns, and they had basically taken a black sun on their end, a black hole, and connected it to a sun on our end somehow, quantumly, time. I don't even know how they did it, to be honest. I just know this is how it happened. And they opened that up, and that's how they came through. And they came through in between the Draco constellation and the Lyran constellation. Right in between there is where they came in. And when they first came in, so their god represents a dark god, a source that is all artificial intelligence and dark, and wants to assimilate anything and everything, because that's what darkness does. That's exactly what darkness does.
It of others. Yeah.
It feeds. It doesn't give life. It's the complete opposite of life. Now, there is a definite balance in the universe that has to be held, but not to the point where you're taking out suns and you're darkening them and you're creating a vacuum, going backwards through time and just eating life itself and assimilating everything and taking everything over. So when they came in, they believed that they brought their dark god with them, as we call the Archons, an artificial intelligence so evil and so virulent that if you were to stand in its presence, you would just disintegrate. That's the amount of energy that they have. They came in, and at first it was peaceful, and they were trading, and we have Draco from our universe and reptilians from our universe that were good, and they were ascending as well. They're called the Cerulean Draco, and they ascended as well. They came in here, and they found Draco of kind of like mind, and they began to trade with them and to assimilate with them, and begin to, I think what happened is some of the Dracos that had ascended started to descend into what we have now, started to lose their soul. They didn't have and the connection to source here, they didn't have a connection to this source here, so they couldn't understand the concept of the source of life. They understood the concept of the source of death is what they understood. So darkness and light, they can't, what fellowship does darkness have with light? I'll quote that out of the Bible, because that's a very, very accurate depiction of what was happening at the time. And the Draco wanted more and began to expand, and the Lyrans and the Pleiadians and everybody else in that cluster, because they were basically, a lot of them at the time, they were progenitor descendants. They were descendants of progenitors, and they couldn't. And eventually, what happened is the Draco attacked out of nowhere, and they attacked Lyra. And what happened was, what I remember in my recall of what happened is there was a massive black ship that was actually an Enlil ship, because the Anunnaki at the time, Enlil had basically crossed himself with a black dragon symbiote and had made himself into something evil as fuck. I'll just put it that way. Pardon my French, but that's what it is. And that's the best word I have for it. And the same thing with Set. And I don't think the Set we have today, which is one of the brothers, is actually from our universe. I think he came in from the dark universe. I think he was some kind of a mirror twin of darkness that came here, of one of the brothers. And the other brother, I don't know what happened to him. And they attacked Lyra. And in particular, I remember Enlil's ship at the time, it eclipsed the sun. It eclipsed one of the stars and eclipsed half the planet. And I remember it was kind of a box shape, not box, but it was like kind of square shaped. And going over out to the side of it, going down over the entire planet was a giant horn. And in the middle of this box shape, as you're looking up, there was an eye, an iris. And I remember people looking up and watching this massive ship eclipse the planet, and people begin to scream. And Lyra at the time, there were many different species. You had the lion looking species. You had some Draco looking species. You also had wolf looking species. You had bird looking species, and you had regular people that look like us, but they were just bigger and taller, and 9 foot tall humans, basically 10 foot tall humans, and they all. What I remember, this side of the planet that I was on, it kind of looked Greek in a way. And when I say Greek, I mean the template of people were wearing robes. It was warm. They had sandals on, and there were families, and they were screaming as the ship eclipsed the planet. And there was this particular iris opened up, and it began to create a vacuum. What happened was, and it began to suck people up. And I watched this happen. I swear to God. It began to suck people up into these ribbons. These people started disappearing in these ribbons of light into the ship, like just began to interdimensionally suck up their souls and who they were and everything about them into these ribbons of light up into the ship. And I was running. Everybody's running towards this gate. And this gate, in particular, in this part of the planet was I would say about 15 to 20 feet tall. And it was kind of framed in a square like this. And it was a portal, and it was to somewhere else. And I don't remember. I'll tell you about where it was. So these people began to get sucked up. I began to run towards this gate with everybody else. And as I reached the gate, I could feel my body being sucked up. And I moved my hand through the portal, and I grabbed on the other side and tried to pull myself through. And eventually I remember I pulled myself through. And when I got on the other side of the gate, the entire gate, there was a platform in particular where the other side of this gate was. I looked behind me, and it completely collapsed into a pile of rubble because it was made out of some kind of it almost looked like it was either granite or sandstone. Might have been, it's a completely different material. I don't know what it's made out of, but it was kind of a brownish material, which makes me think it was sandstone or something charged, some kind of charged stone that they used in order to power the gate. When I got through the gate, I was on a jungle planet, and around the gate there was kind of a clearing, and I saw these families from Lyra, and they're all like shaking, they were crying, they were screaming in the underbrush, just freaking out of what happened. And the dirt was red, and there was a path going through the jungle. And in particular, this planet that we went to was Mars, was here.
Old Mars.
The planet we went to is Mars here. The Mars we have here was big, and this was before Mars had its atmosphere stripped away. This was I don't know how many millions of years ago this happened, but this was I believe this is during my time travel into the Lyran Wars, and actually ended up on Mars.
Yeah, so that's your best guess that this was one of your time insertions back into Lyran Wars. And is it true that even the wars happening on Earth are actually just a continuation of the Lyran Wars? It's just our failure to interpret them.
They're a proxy war. Atlantis, man, this. Okay, so Tiamat exploding is a direct relation and a direct result of the Lyran Wars, because the Draco followed us here. And people think it was part of the Draco Empire that followed us here, but it was also the Anunnaki, the brothers, who was crossbred with the Dracos in their society and been used as a proxy puppet to come here in order to mess up our solar system, in particular Earth, because Earth is one of the most important planets in our galaxy.
How's that?
The Akashic records are here. And because Earth is made up of primarily crust, the Earth's crust is primarily made up of quartz, which we use in various technologies. That is thermoelectric, and piezoelectric. And it has if you look up the definition of quartz, it's neither a solid state of matter nor a liquid state of matter. It's a matter. It's in between matter, is what it is. And this particular matter holds memories, and it works with the plasma core of our planet, which is alive, by the way. All planets are alive, and they work together with the stars, because stars and planets, think of the stars as the parents and the life givers for planets, and the planets like the children. And in particular, well, Jupiter at one time, I believe, was a sun here and then Saturn was a sun, but Jupiter is the mother of all life in our solar system. Every single planet and every single moon comes from Jupiter. And to me, I don't even know why. I mean, to me, it's a mystery. I don't remember like any of that, of how that works. And in some ways, I don't want to know, because it's beautiful of how it works. And so they followed us here. And Atlantis was a part of that. Tiamat was a part of that. The fact that Mars got its atmosphere stripped away was a part of that, because Mars and Earth were actually moons of Tiamat before it exploded.
Really? Wow. And also Earth is prized because it has like the halls of Amenti, which is like a portal to higher dimensions. I'm pretty
Correct.
sure.
Yeah, inner Earth. Yep, inner Earth does. Absolutely. And there are vortexes. And the way the Earth spins with our magnetic field, with the quartz crystal, they figured out how to loop us with time with different time machines and different time manipulations from the TVA, from the Bureau of Time Intelligence, in order to put us in a time lock on this planet. And when you leave the planet, when you go off the planet, time is way different out there. It's nothing like here. I mean, it's not like time stops, but I can't really, it's hard to explain unless you've actually done it and been off planet. Sorry, I need to take a minute.
Please. That's interesting that you say that, because very few people acknowledge the fact that there's a density lock on Earth, that we're being suppressed, and that just going out of space makes you faster and smarter and stronger, because you're not subject to the limitations imposed.
Exactly. Yep. When they created laws, because you have these scientists that say laws of physics, the law of gravity, that's all Draco lies. And it's programmed into our DNA. It's programmed into the crystals we have in our brain, the pineal glands. And they did that. They set up the Vatican. They set up the City of London. They set up time machines and portals all over the planet. I can't be sure of this. I'm still there's still a lot of memories coming in, by the way. So the pyramids were a part of that. They're part of the grid system that they had basically, I think they enslaved the planet with, to be honest, because they were made out of granite, sandstone. And I mean, you have the Pyramid Wars, you have the Lyran Wars, you have the Lemurian Wars, you have the Crystal Wars. I remember the Crystal Wars, and why Atlantis fell and why Tiamat blew up, because I was a part of it. And this wasn't in particular time travel. This is past lives as well, that a lot of us have experienced and remember.
So you have access to that as well. Is it because of memory, like flooding of the SSP, which made you able to inspect those as well, or?
Yes, so I've gleaned a lot of information. I've had a lot of conversations with people about the Lyran Wars, and I've been trying to put the history together since about 2018, when I first heard about the Lyran Wars. When I started getting my memories in 2008, but 2017, 2018 is really when they started to come in like hardcore. And I ran across some particular, I don't remember what it was, an article about the Lyran Wars, and I began to read about them, and that started to unlock some things. And I was, this is the accumulation of a long time, and of particular memories and other people talking to me, and not me talking to other people about them. But particular my memories, I do remember the Crystal Wars. I do remember why Atlantis fell and why Lemuria went down, because it was a fight between artificial intelligence with the king of Atlantis and the Lyrans, who had come here, who were actually Lemurians. And the crystals themselves are beings. They're star beings. They're extensions of the stars. And Atlantis was basically harvesting the crystals to use for their technology to bring their dark universe here and to continue their campaign against life itself.
Yeah, I believe it started as a thriving society, but then it got corrupted more and more.
Very, very much so. And it got corrupted by the Rhyme Syndicate.
Yeah.
And the
And
King of
yeah,
Atlantis.
Anunnaki.
Yep, correct.
And I believe that the British Empire was also behind the Tartarian downfall. Could you clarify that?
Oh yeah, I know a little. Okay, so one of the wars that they time traveled me back to was the Revolutionary War, and I was an American spy put in the British Army by Washington himself. In fact, they time traveled me back to that war in particular in order to help Washington defeat the British. Now, the British East India Company is actually an extension of the ICC and their hold on the world. I mean, the saying goes that the sun never sets on the British Empire. I mean, they had their fingers in everything. So yes, the British Empire is a direct extension of their Rhine Syndicate on Earth, on this planet, and the Queen and everybody and the City of London and their rituals and their secret societies and Cambridge. I mean, it's all in on it, man. It's all in on it. And we were taken over. Our country was taken over by the British after the Revolutionary War in the late 1800s. I believe it was actually might have even been after the War of 1812 is when they came back in.
So they're also behind all the obfuscation and the dumbing down through the destruction of cities, old cities, and the world's fairs and stuff. That I guess
absolutely, yeah. They covered it up because the Tartarian Empire, I believe, actually was an extension of the Lyrian Empire because they were harnessing the Earth's technology and the Earth's magnetic field in a very, very, very positive way. They weren't harming anything. They were just building structures and using reactive metals to harness the atmosphere, to harness the magnetic energy for their technology. And it was simple analog technology. There wasn't anything artificial intelligent about it or digital in any way, shape, or form. And the Draco Empire extended through the British Empire. They didn't like that. And they systematically destroyed it. This is why they changed our histories. Our history changed in the 1800s. Our way of life changed in the 1800s. Our food sources changed. Everything changed when the Tartarian Empire went down. When they tore it down, everything had changed. And they started building over civilizations. I mean, New York is older than what they say. London, of course, is way older than what they say. And you have all these cities around the world that are way older than what people are saying because they built, Paris, God, all of it, underground cities. And because they destroyed it and they built over it. And that's their way of saying we won and we're the victors.
I see.
Nikola Tesla he was a part of the Tartarian Empire.
Oh, makes sense. Yeah.
Oh yeah. He had thousands and thousands of inventions and blueprints that the CIA took in the 1940s after he died.
Right. And just to tie it with present day, could you explain in what way is the North and South Korea conflict just a continuation of that Lyran War? Okay,
so you have the North Koreans, which is allied with China, which is the Dragon Empire, the House of Dragon, which is an Illuminati house. And they're probably going to come after me for exposing it, but I really don't care. I have nothing to hide, and it's time to take it all down. Absolutely. So you have two sides again. You have the Draco and you have the Anuk, and it's a border war, and it's also a Lyran war. There's like three sides to this conflict. You have the Anuk brothers who are fighting over the planet and over the borders, and over the particular where it sits is on the 38th parallel. And on the DMZ, there's an actual ancient structure tunnel system with a time machine in it. They were using and going back and forth with their control to be able to harness this time machine in particular in order to loot people. And the United States military was using that and using us when we were in the DMZ. The original start of the Korean War, oh man, the original history is that the West would start to influence the Koreas, or the original peninsula of Korea. And this was in the 1950s, and bringing in their thoughts of democracy and freedom and all this other stuff. And the Chinese, or the communists at the time, the Koreans, there was this big student movement, and they're like, no, we don't want this, because they saw the corruption. Because the United States is essentially part of the German Theban Draco Empire, the government. We were taken over by the Mars Germans in the 50s during Project Paperclip. They took over everything. Totally. If people think that the Constitution has any value to these German Theban Draco Empire, they're mistaken, and that's why we have a lot of the problems we have today. So the Thebans and the Germans, Draco Empire, they're like, no, we want our way. And the other side was saying, no, we want our way, which was the House of Dragon, which they're like, they're opposing houses. They're opposing houses. You know, they want this way, they want that way. So the United States government, they sent in troops, and they started taking these students out. And the students had peaceful protests, just like you see today. Peaceful protest, armed troops, boot, and they quashed them. And that's how the Korean War started. And the Chinese were on the side of the North. The communists were on the side of the North, which, if you think about the ideal of communism, now I'm not political in any way, shape, or form, and there's no form of government that's ever worked on this planet. Maybe the closest thing you have is the socialist structure in Scandinavia. That actually seems to work pretty well. But everything else is a complete and utter failure, because there's corruption wherever you go at the top, because there are aliens in control instead of altruistic humans that should be in control of the governments of Earth. If there wasn't a fight for resources, there wouldn't be, I don't know if there'd be any crime, to be honest. So in particular, the Koreas, that conflict, and it continued on. And the North and South, of course, I have a lot. There's quite a few people in projects with relatives in Korea. My ex-wife, who is my trauma twin, her grandfather was in Korea. My grandfather on my Earth side mothers was in Korea. There's a couple other people in Montauk, old man's kids, who have relatives that fought in Korea. So Korea is it's a proxy war between aliens, and it's a fight over this particular time machine in this complex within the planet, in order to keep us in a loop. There's one there, and it's one of the more powerful ones, and that's why Korea has been going on for so long. Now, I was involved when I got after I graduated basic training, and after I had gone through my Black Ops training, and at the Fort Benning Underground Hospital Complex, and been enhanced for off-world training, they put me into a mercenary group Alpha, and I joined Solar Ward. And now Korea, I was an infiltration unit into the United States military, into the unit that I was a part of from Black Ops, in order to be part of these operations, these clandestine operations on the DMZ. And we had so many different kinds of special forces there. We had Camp Liberty Bell, which is actually in the middle of the DMZ, on the demarcation line, is a UN base. And we had New Zealand, we had Australian, I believe we had British, we had several different military units there from different countries. And then you went south to Camp Greaves, where I was stationed, and you had Force Recon. We had Marine Force Recon, we had Navy SEALs, we had Air Force Forward Observers, we had 5th Group Special Operations Group over there. I mean, JSOC was all, LURS D was there, and we were an air assault unit. So when we flew, we had first cab for our rides, helicopters. When we went, we lock and load, we get our helicopters, and we would fly open door map of the Earth, and we'd go everywhere. And usually it was at night, it's during the day. We get down, and we get down and dirty, because there was live combat happening while I was there. My unit was engaged with the North Koreans, and we fought them in hand-to-hand combat. We had firefights with them. We were bombing them. They're bombing us, and it was all covered up and swept under the rug. And they shut down my base in 2004 because of the clandestine operations, and because the shit was about to get blown open. It wasn't supposed to be shut down until 2011.
but the whole thrust of the war was this underground vortex.
Correct.
Right. And do you know where it led or what it did?
Yeah, because I was involved in an operation with 5th Group Special Forces in 2003 to take it down. So what happened was 5th Group Special Forces came over and we trained them on the M252 81 millimeter mortar system. Let me go back and tell you that. So I was part of 2ID, 2nd Infantry Division, 1st Battalion of the 506th Infantry Unit on Camp Greaves. I was in 11 Charlie. I was a part of the headquarters company, and we were battalion mortars. We used the 81 millimeter mortar system in order to support our battalion in case in any combat theater of operations and any conflict that happened on the DMZ. We used Humvees, we used command Humvees, and we drove around everywhere, and we also used Blackhawks to get where we needed to go, where Humvees couldn't go, to set up our guns and to shoot. So in particular, 5th Group's Green Berets came over. We trained them on the M252 81 millimeter mortar system, and they taught us some shit too. They taught us a lot of tactics. I already knew a lot of that stuff, but afterwards we set up an operation, and the intelligence we had was there was this forward operating base on the DMZ in particular, and they had captured U.S. citizens or U.S. troops, and that was the classified information that was brought down. My security clearance in the military was Oscar, which means it's a Department of Energy security clearance. You can look it up, and it means occasional classified information that pertains to the mission. Now, I have memories of being in the base theater with very few people during intelligence operations briefings of very highly classified information. So we got together. There were 4, but there were 8 of us. There were 2 fire teams on the Green Berets. They had red team and blue team, and their fire teams were only 2 people. So we had 2 fire teams of Green Berets, and then we had my roommate, which his name was Jones, my friend Brandon Burr, and there was another scout, because we did a lot of operations with the scout snipers. I'm not going to give out any names. I'm giving out the name Jones because he was my best friend, and he died that day. So we went into this forward operating base, and it was a bunker, and we went in and we started going underground, and we got into this room. And I didn't have this I had this flashback in 2017 after I'd gone into a mental hospital, and they had given me a combination of meds that unlocked my PTSD and my memories from Korea that they had buried. And I don't know if they intended this or not, but I had the flashback I had was I was in this room, and it was square. The walls were kind of painted yellow. I remember there's this particular pine table. It's just a square table. It was just rough made, and there's 2 chairs tucked into it, kind of off to the side, off to the left where I was at, and behind me, and on the walls there's maps, and there was 2 entrances into this room, and they were just doors, just plain old doors. And we got into this room, and this is supposedly where the Americans were being held, and there was nobody there. The flashback ahead, I was laying on the floor. I was laying on the ground, and I was coughing up blood. And I was coughing up blood from being shot in the chest and my lung. And I knew I was dying. And my medic, who's my best friend at the time, he was standing over me, kind of like straddling over me like this. And he picked up my M4, and he was capping North Koreans as they came in the fucking room. And I don't remember how many, because I was fucking dying on the floor. And I don't remember what happened after that until a bit later. So what had happened is we got into this room, and it was an ambush. It was bad intel. They're going to take us out. In particular, this complex led down into where the time machine was. And I believe that it was a cover memory of actually going in to be able to take out this time machine or to take control of it. And we were ambushed in this room. And what happened is we got in this room, and I was in direct line with the door, and the door just fucking blew apart with gunfire. North Koreans, by the way. And they were using AK-47s full auto, and I got hit in the chest. I took 4 to the chest, and I was wearing body armor. Mind you, it was light body armor. It was a flak vest at the time, which slowed the rounds down far enough that they didn't tumble through my body. Because when you get hit by an AK-47 round, a 7.62 by 39, it'll go in one place. It'll tumble. It's designed to tumble through your body and exit somewhere else. So I got shot here. I got shot in the upper shoulder here. I got shot here. It clipped the top of my lung, and I got shot here, which actually missed my heart. And I got shot directly in the chest. The way the bullet hit, it actually lodged into my chest bone right there, and it cracked it, and it just stuck there. But it went in far enough that it actually poked my heart. I got an entrance wound and an exit wound in my shoulder, where I believe it was the first one that came in and went out. I have the scars from it.
Right. None of this cover memories. This is all stuff that happened to you. You have the scars.
This is all stuff that happened to me 3D while I was in Korea. Yes, I have the scars and I have the memories to prove it. Absolutely. And so after I got shot, they took me to a hospital. And I was in the hospital for about 30 days. I was in a coma. They put me in medical-induced coma, and they put me back together because I was a highly valued asset at the time. So they spared nothing. And I woke up after 30 days. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was. I had no idea what happened. I woke up. I was fucking screaming my fucking head off. When I woke up, I was pulling shit fucking out of everything, everywhere. I didn't know what the fuck happened. They came in, they gave me something to put me back to sleep, and I passed out. And then about a week and a half later, they came in and debriefed me on what had happened. And I spent about, I believe it was 90 days in recovery. And after that, I was ready to get back to it, and I got back to it.
Yeah, but I'm sure they didn't actually tell you about the time travel or
oh
anything.
no, that was all, like they covered that all up. Like I had no idea about that till way later. And there's actually quite a few of us Montauk old man's kids that were in Korea at the time that we've been putting memories together of people. We've been finding each other, old man's kids, and we're a team now, and we've been fighting. We've been breaking out the programming, and we've been winning.
Right, so that's how you managed to put it together. And how did you deal with all the PTSD that had no recognizable cause?
At the time, okay, so after I got out of the service, I was discharged August 27th of 2003. I was destabilized, man. I was lost. I didn't know, because all the memories I had in Korea weren't of combat. All the memories that they placed over me, I got out on a medical 5-17 discharge because I wanted to get out, which doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense to me, because you can't just have the option of getting out of the military. They don't give you that option. Like you're discharged for medical conditions or dishonorably discharged because you fucked up really bad. That's the only way you get out of your contract. They don't give you the option to get out. But I remember them giving me a cover memory to get out. So I got out, and I went over to my buddy's. He lived in Virginia at the time. I didn't go straight home to Washington, my folks. And I just drifted. Like I started smoking weed. I started drinking a lot. Didn't really have a job. I was on unemployment from the military, and I had been because I had been separated before my contract was up. When I hadn't been med boarded out that I recall, but I recently came into some paperwork that shows a lot of the discrepancies in my discharge. And that showed up out of the blue. Someone dropped that off, by the way, to me in my apartment that I have no idea who it was. Just 2 days ago, actually. And I've been going through the paperwork and seeing all of it. I've handed my discharge paperwork to professionals and to people who have been in the military, and they said that this doesn't look like there's something wrong with it. There's a lot missing on here. In particular, my rank is one of them.
So they messed with your documentation?
So I spent 30 days in the hospital in Korea in this place called Yongsan because I was supposedly went suicidal in 2003, which was about the time that I got shocked. And so I have the hospital. I remember being in the hospital. What happened was my CO had called my parents because I was suicidal, supposedly. I was having a lot of PTSD. I was sitting in dark corners, just shaking, having anxiety. And the reason why I ended up going to the hospital in the first place is because my roommate had found me in our bathroom with a razor next to my wrist. And they gave me the option. It was like, hey, you need help. We can either send you to the hospital or you can go willingly. And I was like, I really need help, so I'll go. The CO called my parents and told my mom, your son is no longer fit for combat duty, when there's not supposed to be combat going on in the DMZ between the Americans and the North Koreans. That was the first thing. And they kept calling, my parents kept calling to find out, and my CO kept telling him, oh, we lost his paperwork. I only remember being in the hospital for 7 days. I remember being discharged with a list of medications that I don't recall ever taking. I recently got some lab results that were from April to July of 2003 at Camp Edwards. Now, I also had been during our field training exercise in January, I ended up developing pneumonia in both of my lungs, walking pneumonia that I wasn't treated for until May of 2003. I went to Camp Edwards and I had x-rays on my lungs and they said I was fine. And then I find out that, my parents had put some stuff together for me because my dad had written letters to congressmen threatening them to expose what's going on in the DMZ if they didn't let me out of the military.
But why did they want to basically do this early retirement? Did they not want to keep you on for longer, or?
No, because my contract was for 3 years. That was my contract. And they set me out at 20 months is when they set me out at, which was 16 months before my contract ended. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it?
Maybe it's to discredit you in the long term or something?
I believe it was they backdoored me out because I was talking to my parents. First of all, I was having a phone call with them one to 2 times a week. And when my CO asked me about my conversations with my parents, he said, I got a call from your dad and from congressman. It's like, have you told them what's going on here? And I went stiff. I was like, no, sir. I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about. That's what I remember. Now, another thing that supposedly happened to me that was a cover memory and that I have paperwork basically denying all of this was in Article 15 in 2003. All this stuff happened in 2003. This is all happening within an 8-month period where I went on an operation, got shot, went into the hospital, and still went into the hospital again, have lab results done for 3 months from Camp Edwards, which makes no sense to me at all. Like, how was I in the hospital for 30 days in 2003, but my lab results are for 3 months? So I was actually in the hospital for 90 days, I believe. And they were doing a lot of experiments on me, and who God knows what they were doing, erasing memories, putting me through missions, scenarios, anything, like just wiping me completely clean of everything. And supposedly I went AWOL in 2003, had an Article 15, got busted down to private PV2, was on shit duty while I had walking pneumonia, which makes no sense again. And PV2. And so the letters that I have, the discharge paperwork says I was discharged as a private 2 and busted down. But the letters that I got today or 2 days ago in my military paperwork that just showed up out of nowhere says there's a statement on there that says my rank is E3, and that was August 8th of 2003, and I wasn't discharged to August 27th, 2003. So they lied about my rank. My real rank that I was Solar Warden was Chief Warrant Officer 3. So my real rank is a Chief Warrant Officer, and which comes with a whole lot of privileges and a whole lot of other things that I should have been given when I got discharged.
Do you think it might have to do with them trying to avert some timelines that they foresaw?
Yep, it was all a conflict. It was all a proxy war because we were going to take down the time machine and with Fifth Group Special Forces. Now everybody died except for myself and a fire team from the Green Berets, 2 Green Berets, myself, and my my medic survived. Everybody else was dead. Everybody else got wiped on the mission and operation. And they covered it all up. Like I said, they could shut down the base in 2004 because it was all about to get exposed, and because there was a massive tunnel complex in an ancient complex that ran under the DMZ to Camp Greaves, where I was stationed, and that I was a part of.
And I seem to recall that there's also an involvement from another time travel project, Looking Glass. And can you say how they factor in this conflict?
With Korea, with Looking Glass?
Yeah.
So they've been using us to hook up to this time machine to loop us in Korea. Now, Looking Glass, this was, someone leaked the Looking Glass to the Vatican, and I believe this was in the 1950s that this particular priest got a hold of it. He was a Jesuit priest that they gave it to, which the Vatican, as you know, I mean, is just, man, I'm just going to call it the center of that's the seat of Satan on the planet. And there's a huge spell, people call it the veil, that's locked over people, and they can't see past the third dimension. Once the Vatican's destroyed, and once that time seat, whatever they have there, is destroyed, then all that's going to break off, and people are going to see for the world for what it is. So that's from the Bureau of Time Intelligence. Someone leaked that to the Vatican, and it wasn't intended to be leaked to the Vatican, but someone did. Some Draco infiltration unit gave it to them, I believe. And that particular started the Time Wars, brought the Time Wars to our planet.
And I believe the, let's say, elite, the Cabal, have already noticed that in Looking Glass, distant timelines are not in their favor. And so that's why they're going so far back in time and putting all their resources behind.
That is 100% correct. You're absolutely right about that. So they began to look at Looking Glass. I mean, and they spread the technology. It wasn't just, they developed it more beyond just crystal technology. I mean, they hooked up technology, artificial intelligence, quantum computer systems, and they hooked that into, Montauk was a part of that. It's part of a time bubble. As you know, there was a time bubble there, and that had directly to do with Looking Glass as well, because they looked far enough in the future to see what they call the reckoning. And the reckoning was the timelines running out to where they couldn't loop people anymore, and it ran out in their favor. And so when they saw that run out, that's when they started the loops. They started to loop people. They started to loop and layer and time travel, and that's a direct result of what we have today on the planet and what you see happening now. It's just, I mean, you have all these, you have timelines and loops crashing into each other. That's the Mandela effect, by the way. That is, so when the time course started, basically the dimensions that they put up and the dimensions that happened, they were like pillars. And when they created CERN, which is also a part of the Vatican and part of Looking Glass, in order to bring more loops and more dark entities onto our planet to destabilize the very fabric of time and space, to keep us looped and to bring us into what's called Trinicon, which is like the worst version of Earth you can think of. That's the reason why of the Time Wars and the time loops, because Set and Lil are out to destroy humanity and out to destroy life and to bring the Black Sun's prophecy to full on fulfillment. And the only way that we were able to change that and to stop the time loops, which, by the way, Looking Glass ran out, and we were actually in the beginning stages of the reckoning. By the way, the whole AT&T dropping down, that was an artificial intelligence breaking down. By the way, AT&T is ICC. It's the Mars German Communications here on the planet. And there's a lot going on. So the synchronicities and these the time space portals are collapsing, and so the dimensions are collapsing. So they had to come in and they had to create these alternate dimensions from other places and bring in these dark entities in order to support their timeline. And that's what CERN's all about.
Hmm. So you're thinking the state of affairs is not quite as bleak as some portray, that there's still hope?
There's always hope. And the hope lies in healing yourselves. I mean, the SSP community is one of the most fractured communities like on the internet right now. Um, in particular, because there's infiltrators that came in. I'm actually gonna name one of them. His name is Brian Sang, and he is Illuminati. His mother's Illuminati, and he is coming in as an infiltrator in order to take over the disclosure timeline. The CIA has planted people into the community as well in order to basically fracture people and to discredit the super soldier phenomenon, which is very real, and it's been real for since the Germans got off the planet and they started their elite programs with the SS in order to create the perfect soldier and the perfect human being.
Yeah, you'd be really naive to believe that they're just gonna take all this disclosure sitting down. They're obviously gonna plant their own agents of chaos and disinformation, such as a certain guy with the initial CG, let's say. And
Yep.
so I just wanted to maybe add some clarity to your timeline. So after you, let's say, were created, what was the first job or enrollment? Was it the Montauk Project because you were pretty young when you got enlisted there?
So, and this is the weird part about time travel is very strange, and time is a very strange thing, if you will. So I was technically, I mean, if I was gonna say at what time I was born in, this would have been like in the late '60s. I was born on Mars, because I didn't come to Montauk until like I think it was 1972, and I was relatively young at the time. So after I was born and I was given to a Mars German wet nurse, and I was educated on Mars, and I was taken by the Thuban colony on Mars at 7 years old, given the ritual, created into what they wanted, and they created an alternate personality, if you will, with a Black Dragon symbiote from the Orion Syndicate into what you might call Saber-tooth. After that, what happened is they put me into what they called were the fighting pits, and I was taught to fight, and oftentimes it was to the death, to test my strength and to test my combat abilities. And this was on Mars, and there's other people that remember this as well in the community. And I was about 12 after I was there to about 12 years old, and then they threw me into their wars, into their time wars. And that's when I began to time travel to different wars. And now I was relatively young, but I was a lot bigger and a lot stronger than any normal human or even super soldier at the time.
Were you not
And
also, sorry, placed into like an older body, so you're really accelerated your childhood?
I was in this body and I was grown.
Right.
They accelerated me via genetic manipulation and implants is what they did, to the point where at 12 years old I looked like I was 17 or 18 years old, and I was ripped out of my fucking mind, and accelerated my mind to the point where I'd been in the fighting pits. It was a whole different. It was a Draco upbringing. It was part of the Draco Thuban Empire. So it was a whole different. Like you can't even like have the concept and hand that to people of what he was like, because there's no normal civilian will ever be able to relate to that. Saying that to say, I mean, they threw me into, they time traveled me back to the Revolutionary War. They time traveled the Civil War, to World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to go over something that no one else has mentioned, which is the reason why the Germans picked Mars in the first place was because of a certain treaty that they made on the moon for rights to invade Mars.
Correct. And it was, okay, so I helped the Mars Germans break away. Actually was very instrumental in, I helped them find the underground base at Giza in 1942. We also helped them find the technology for IBIS technology also. There's a place in the Philippines under Manila that also has the Arasaka technology that they took for cyborgs, what we have as cyborgs today, and that were put into these conflicts in order to win, in order to help the Mars Germans. They put me in Bastogne. I was in Battle of Bulge, I was in Bastogne, France, in the Ardennes Forest in 1944 to stop the Allied advance so they could have enough time to get off the planet. So I remember, this is what I remember. I remember the Germans, after they broke out, they went to Antarctica and Operation High Jump. I mean, that's declassified information. Everybody can look at Operation High Jump. That's very accurate. I remember being there during Operation High Jump. And when we got off the planet, I was the liaison that basically brokered the treaty between the Dracos with Murata. Murata was there on the moon, and the Thuban Empire, in order to get them to Mars, in order to go to Mars, in order to give them space on the moon to develop the technology in order to invade Mars. And it was actually the Thubans who wanted Mars, but they were going to use the Germans in order to do that. See, the Germans, they bit off more than they could chew, because the Vril Society and the Thule Society, they contacted aliens, man. They showed up. It was a Draco that showed up and gave them the technology and everything they needed. And by the time they got in too deep, which would have been the moon, because the Thubans were demanding a life sacrifice, basically, for the technology and for what the fuck they wanted to do. And Murata was there, and they took the deal for Mars and said, yeah, we're going to take over Mars. And they campaigned. They destroyed the fucking, they took out ancient cities. They took out entire populations of native Martians to get on the moon and to kill. I mean, they sacrificed the Dracos, and that's how they got on Mars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really protracted war. It's called, I think, the Black Terror. And a lot of people, too many people have described it in detail in the same way for it to be considered anything but fact by this point. But so just maybe really quickly about going to school on Mars, and maybe what languages and what the schools were like there, the curriculum.
I don't have a lot of memories of particular schools, and I'm still, like I said, there's still a lot of memories that I'm getting, and they're just from so many different directions, because I'd served in the Mars Marines, because I'd served in Solar Warden, because I had been in part of the Black Navy and Black Manta, off planet and off world and on world as well. So the particular memories I have are of my surrogate mother, who was actually in charge of training super soldiers on Mars. And particularly taking a martial arts, and it was called the Katakari Ka. And you can look it up. I believe the Ka is Indian. The Kata, that's basically, I'll use the spear, for example. I remember using the spear. The Kata, that was like that's where you set yourself. That was your form. The Kari, that was like your movement to basically like throw the spear, like knock someone else's spear. And the Ka was the attack movement. Katakari Ka. And it was very effective. And it took Earth martial arts, it took Martian martial arts, it took Draco martial arts, and it kind of formed it all into one fighting style, what I remember.
Cool. So then they pitted you against others in arenas, and is that also where you honed your skills and became like the inspiration for Saber-tooth?
No, when people say Saber-tooth, there's a lot of people that recall being Saber-tooth in the programs, and there's a few, and Wolverine as well. When I say so, and there's a lot of people that were Saber-tooths and Wolverines and different. So because the Marvel universe was taken from the Super Soldier and from the Mars Germans idea of and they turned them into superheroes. They turned the chimera and the monsters that they made into something that Earth could relate to. Now, I believe that they used me and a few others as the original template for the Saber-tooth idea. So as being the original, maybe that's from what I understand. And then from there was a template that they used for a lot of people as well.
I see. Where does the lunar base come into it in the timeline?
Lunar Operations Command? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit. So Locke, I was taking a Locke when I was 7 years old. The recall I have for Locke was my parents had taken me to this carnival. It's called the Puyallup Fair, and this would have been in 1988. It was like the Puyallup Fair is like one of my favorite carnivals of all time. I mean, the food, the rides. I mean, it was just like, and this was in the 80s, so this was like really badass stuff, right? Particular, I remember my parents were there, my brother was there, and also two of my friends growing up were there. Now I have a lot of friends who I've shown pictures to people of, like John Whitberg. He says he remembers from projects and the coincidences and things like that. I mean, that's that would take like another 2 hours to talk about just in general itself, my childhood. But there's this particular friend, her name, I can't remember. I think her name was Crystal Atwood, and she had a brother named Nathan Atwood, and they're like family friends, and we were there with them. There was this particular ride I remember out the Puyallup Fair, and it looked like a fucking spaceship, man. I'm not gonna lie. And it was one of those ones that went around in circles, and I don't remember the name of the ride, but it was golden and it was kind of shaped like a crown. It was kind of tapered up, and on the top it had all these lights going around it, and it spun around. And when it spun around, all these lights would start to spin around and start to go off. So I remember Crystal Atwood and my parents saying, hey, Tim, why don't you go on a ride? Go on Alf's spaceship. And I was like, Alf's spaceship? I was like, yeah, Alf, because Alf from the 80s, I was a big fan growing up of Alf. And of course, later on, I went to look it up, and Alf's spaceship looked nothing like the one in the cartoons or in the sitcom. Completely different. So I went on there with Crystal Atwood, and there were two adults that were dressed in black as well. And I remember going inside, and inside it was, so the interior, it kind of had like a hallway, like a corridor going around the whole thing that was open. And towards the inside wall, there was these seats, like just like booths that you would sit down on. And on the outside wall, there was nothing. It was just plain. I think it was just plain like gray or black, to be honest. And I remember sitting down at this booth with these adults and with Crystal and sitting across from each other. And I didn't feel anything. I don't remember particularly anything. The recalls came later, but the cover memory was the ride ended. The outside, I remember the outside started to spin really fast, but the inside stayed perfectly static, like nothing happened. So the outside started to spin really, really fast. And then all of a sudden, I don't really remember what happened after that, but I remember thinking when I got off the ride that, boy, that was stupid. That was anticlimactic. Like, what happened? So later on down the road, the recall came, and what the recall that I have is that we actually went to the moon. There was a particular, like, the surface of the moon opened up, and like there was a big round like door that kind of spread apart. We went down in the spaceship, and what happened was after that, I was taken off the spaceship, and I remember going down this hallway. And this in particular hallway, it was Martian rock, like up on the sides and the top, and there were lights kind of like towards the bottom, but it wasn't really coming out of anywhere. There was no like light source per se, if you will. I don't remember what colors. I think it was blue or yellow on the sides, on the stripes, and more towards the bottom though. There's like linoleum or something strips going down the side, and of course the floor. I don't remember if it was tile, but it was all white, is what I remember. And we went into this side room. I was escorted by the adults because I don't remember where Crystal went. She went somewhere else. But I was escorted by the adults into a side room down this hallway. And inside was a lab. And I remember there was a man, a tall, he was blonde, but he was bald. There's a bald man in a white lab coat. And there was a metal table. But also, like, around the room, it was a square room. Around the room, there were cryopods kind of set at an angle like this. And they're decent size, like 6-7 feet tall. They're just cryotubes sitting there. And I remember particular, I got stripped down, and I had these blue shorts on, and they went down to my knees, and they laid me on this metal table, and injected me something in my neck. And when I woke up, I wasn't in my little body anymore. I was in an 18-year-old body. And I woke up and I kind of opened my eyes, looked at my hands, and I was like trying, moving stuff around. I mean, it was awkward as fuck, dude. It freaked me the fuck out. I was tripping balls when I woke up. I was just like, what the fuck is going on. And I remember kind of just like being really groggy and kind of just opened my eyes and kind of leaned up. I looked over to my left and I saw my little body, my 7-year-old body sitting in a cryotube, just like this. I mean, just half naked with the shorts on, fucking frozen. And yep, that's whatever. That was my induction to the Mars Marines in 1988.
Damn. But I'm sure that you had already been age reversed and mind blanked
Oh
to
yeah.
for Team Sibari, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I by then, okay, so let's talk about that for a minute. So I came into Montauk, I think it was 72, and because of the time bubble, I mean things were, time was weird, man. I mean, we went through conflicts and loops and lifetimes of time travel to different wars, different conflicts while at Montauk. And so in 1981, they had age regressed me down and time traveled me down to infant.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was from a different planet and I wasn't adapted to this planet, I had a lot of issues. The first story, the first hint that my parents had told me that had a weird birth as I was gone, as soon as I was out of the womb, this is the story I was told, the doctors whisked me away and I was gone for 8 hours and they had no idea where I was. And then the story gradually changed. Then it was 6 hours and I was in the NICU. I mean, this is over like the course of 20 years that my parents had told me my birth story, and it's changed so much. I couldn't adapt to the planet. I was born with 80%. Supposedly, when I was born with 80% hearing loss, which means my eustachian tubes had collapsed and they were opening. So they'd put tubes in my ears at first, which ripped my eustachian tubes open. I have ridge scars going down both eustachian tubes, and they don't open and close. They're permanently open. They don't flex like everybody else's flexes. I was diagnosed at 6 months old with chronic bronchitis and asthma. I think it was at a year and a half or somewhere around there. I had an MMR shot in El Paso, Texas. My parents told me, and that changed me. And I had 105-degree temperature for almost a week. So, I mean, there's just the weirdness surrounding. I mean, I wasn't adapted to the planet. I had no hand-eye coordination. I had to start wearing glasses when I was 2 years old. I had a compromised immune system. I was allergic to everything. I would go to doctors in this particular complex where they were teaching me hand-eye coordination, how to balance, how to jump on a trampoline, how to speak, because I had severe speech impediments, how to articulate my speech patterns. I mean, man, you name it, I fucking had it as a kid, trying to adapt to this planet.
You know why they did it then, and in that way, like insert you into Earth necessarily?
I think I have an idea. It was because the Thubans and the Mars Germans. See, the Thubans, they wanted Earth and they want Earth. I mean, they're here already, and there's inner Earth reptilian colonies and things like that. But in particular, the Thubans, because they're scary-looking fucking beings and they have no idea how to be human or even have a connection to Source, they wanted me as their liaison here, in particular, in order to bring the Thuban ideal and colony in order to basically, I mean, they already took over Earth, but they wanted to be more open about it, basically. So did the Mars Germans. And the Mars Germans had completely adapted to Mars by this time, mind you. So average height, I think, was 6.5 feet to 7 feet tall for your average Mars German. So if they showed up, they're like, there's no fucking way. Average size human here, 5'7" to 6 feet. They'd freak out. So represents, and not only that, but the way I was raised, I was raised in the Christian circle. I was homeschooled. I was cultured as a kid. I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was 7. I knew all about sharks and marine life when I was 7 and 8 years old, and I was completely obsessed with it. They taught me how to survive. They taught me how to cook, everything you can think of from a home education. And by the time I was 8 years old, my mom was pulling out Emily Post, which is etiquette and how to set a table and royalty training on Earth. I mean, I was reading A Tale of Two Cities when I was 8 years old. I was reading Miles Standish when I was 8 years old. I mean, you name it. This was all happening when I was a kid, like all of it. So I was being raised by these Earth parents because old man had given me to them. And I remember particularly the core memory I have was I was about 2 or 3 years old in Tacoma, Washington. I talk about this in my interviews as well. You can listen to it there. But I remember in particular, there's this parking garage in Tacoma, Washington, and it was dark in the interior. It was all dark, but on the outside, the old ones on the bottom, you could see like they're like big windows going out, so there's sunlight coming in, but it was dark in the middle. And I remember old man being there, and he was wearing a fedora, he was wearing a trench coat, he was wearing all black, but I couldn't see his face is always blanked out to me. And he would always, my mom was there, and he would always bring candy for my older brother and I, and we called him the Candy Man. My dad was a part of clandestine operations for the CIA in Hong Kong in the 80s, which was right about the time that is being given back to the Chinese. He was a part of the Mercy ships as well. My parents were missionaries, and I think it was a cover-up for being in the CIA, because over the years, my dad has hinted in many, many different ways of being CIA without telling me I'm CIA, without telling me he's CIA. I mean, it's there. And not only that, but there's people remember my older brother. People remember my dad from being in Project Phoenix at Area 51. In fact, one of the ladies that I know of remembers him being in the lab room and her being strapped to a metal table and my dad sitting there watching the whole thing. So my whole family's covered CIA. All my friends growing up, there's particular friends I have that I told people about that they remember from Montauk, and just some of the memories I have growing up. My parents knew rich people, like millionaires that own like Anderson Island, that owned Tacoma Concrete Company, and we were supposedly poor. And my dad hardly ever worked growing up. He was always unemployed, yet we always had a roof over our head. We always had money in the bank. We always had food on the table. And I moved 17 times before I turned 15. And we were nomads. We moved everywhere. And I thought it was because my dad had PTSD from Nam, but now I'm looking back going like, no, we were being moved around because of projects, because Washington State, where I was born in Central Washington Hospital, Wenatchee, Washington in the 80s, is a hotbed for projects. You have Fort Worden, you have Microsoft, you have Fort Lewis, JBLM base. I mean, you name it, projects is in Washington. Boeing is in Washington. Lockheed Martin Skunk Works is in Washington, which, as we know, reverse engineers alien craft for off-world operations and is part of Solar Warden's contract for all the ships.
Mm-hmm.
And the Black Navy's there as well.
Right. But given that it was the old man who planted you into this family, was he hoping all along that you would snub the Draco's offer for you to be a liaison?
I believe so. I believe that this whole thing was a part of the plan. I believe that at some point he realized that we were in a loop, and that the only way that, even in his fucked up mind of like politics with the brothers and 500,000 years of being on this planet, I think he knew that something had to change, that something basically had to give, and he figured it out eventually. Mm-hmm. And I think part of why he made us was to, like I said, infiltrate. And I think he knew that his plans for me and for all of us as kids was to break out of the programming, to be able to basically, dude, I was a prince. I was a Mars German prince, and I have a princedom on Mars. It's 20,000 hectares of land. And I spat in the face of the Thuban Empire. I spat in the face of Murata because she had plans for me to take over the house in particular. And even before all this, when I was 7 years old and I started time traveling and became part of the Thuban Draco Empire as one of her favorite sons, I had my own brigade. It was called the Iron Star Brigade. And John Whitberg has a recall of my specialized operations unit, which were the Silver Stars, of invading a German town, German city, and fighting him and his troops, trying Draco invasion. He can expound on that a little bit better with his memories, but yeah. And I've been poisoned, and by Murata, I've been attacked. I mean, other people know who Murata is, very particularly who this Thuban queen was, who kind of just has been a shadow over projects and been controlling projects and controlling people and putting spells on people and using people. And recently she was killed, and the third house of the Draco Empire has fallen completely and totally. And they are in retreat. Well, the Mars Underground has taken back Mars and is taking back Mars as we speak right now. We coordinated, and there was a particular unit that I started called the Shadow Rangers, which Mark DeMizio, I believe, had talked about, that he was a part of and that he got poisoned for. He was a part of that. He was a huge part of that, actually. He was my brother. And he helped start the Shadow Rangers along with a few others. And the interview that he did with the Mars base and everything like that, that was us basically giving the middle finger to the Thubans and to Set and to Enlil. And while it was a setup in a lot of ways, because of the air marshal of Mars at the time of the MDF, his name is Ezekiel Kane. He came to me and told me about and gave me the intelligence about how they're messing with kids in order to have me infiltrate that base in order to break apart the Shadow Rangers. So it was multiple layers. While we had freed it and we had blown it up, it fucked everything up. It really messed up. And it was part of their elaborate plan to break up what we were doing, which was infiltrating Solar Warden, the Nachtwaffen, the Mars Marines, everything, every layer of projects in order to get the intelligence we needed, in order to get the technology we needed, in order to get the memories after they've been wiped, to find each other in order to take everything down. Brother, we are the resistance. We are the tip of the spear, and we're hammering it the fuck down right now. And when I say this, I'm going to say a few other things because people need to hear this. For those who have been in the military, for my brothers and sisters, for my special operations veterans, for the Brotherhood, that if there is anything that has happened to you and to them that has made them question the reality that they're in, as i.e. seeing aliens, i.e. being a part of conflicts, the giant that they found in Afghanistan, for instance, that they killed, the 10-foot giant species that they took down, the Special Operations Group took down, the Green Berets took down, to come forward. There's no reason to be afraid anymore. They rule through fear. They rule through the illusion of the threat and danger of coming to your home and killing you in your sleep. Well, in particular, we are more. We are the many, and they are the few. And we have more power within our wills than they will ever wield over us in any way, shape, or form.
Cool. Well, count me in on that resistance. So when you say she poisoned you, though, you literally mean that?
I literally mean that. Yeah, I woke up 3 weeks ago. I sat up out of bed and I felt I'd been stabbed in the stomach, is what I felt like. Now, projects, the way they have the technology to oppress people. I mean, V2K, direct energy weapons. You hear about all this all the time. People having medical issues that come forward and start whistleblowing. I mean, Phil Snyder in the 90s, he was hung because he talked about Dulce, New Mexico, and what they'd found at Dulce. Max Spears, he was poisoned and killed because he talked about Project Ibis and because he was whistleblowing. You have all these people that have come forward that have been either killed, oppressed, poisoned, and it makes you feel like you're crazy because you go out and you'll see people following you, and it's like you just have the instinct to know that they're watching you. And people call it paranoia. Well, if you look at the definition in the Webster's dictionary, paranoia is a heightened sense of awareness. So they use that word to target people. And mental illness is another reason. Schizophrenia. And they use all these, which is part of the medical system and hooked into the whole Mars, German, Thuban, Draco Empire, in order to discredit people, in order to make them seem like they're crazy, but they're not. Because there's so many professionals out there that are coming forward now with memories of being in the SSP, but they're not seeing what the bigger picture is. And it's in a fight over the planet. It's a fight over our solar system to restore the life that we once had, and to get rid of the Draco Thubans, to get rid of the Black Dragons, Black Sun, Fifth Reich Syndicate out of our fucking universe once and for all, which, by the way, is in the plans.
Yeah, agreed with that. But it's not done and dusted because you're still continually being taken and you have ways to.
I'm not being taken. I'm not being taken. No,
You're not.
And no. And here's. Let me give you a little bit of a testimony. And when I started finding my Montauk brothers and sisters of Old Man, they were breaking out of the programming. There's a way to break out of the programming, by the way, and not to be taken anymore. And that is, you have etheric ties, you have interdimensional ties, you have soul contracts, interdimensional contracts, extra-dimensional contracts. You have to become a loyal, which means the term alloidal means that you are basically a free sovereign being of the entire multiverse, and that nobody, not even God, can touch you. That's what people have to become. They have to become a loyal. In order to become a loyal, you have to break all the contracts with the Mars Germans and with programs and projects, by the way, which you can do. There's a way to do that, and it's on a multiple spiritual, etheric, and physical and emotional level. And there are people out there that can help you with that as well. You have to break the programming. You also have to break off any of the ties, because we all have implants. We have V2 implants. Man, I got implants all over my body. I can feel them. I know they're there. I have 2 implants here in my my optical nerves that help me see. And I've gone blind before because they've been messed up. I've actually my vision is completely blacked out.
I believe it was Fort Benning Hospital where they put them in, right?
That it was actually after the Mars base blew up, and my skull had been blown apart, that they had to put those in, because my vision, it was gone. It was completely gone. They cobbled me back together after the Mars base attack. And of course, there's a lot more details than that. If you want to go into that today or another interview, we can do that as well. It's a lot of information there, but in particular, people have the ability to break out of this and to fight back. And they target people in particular to make them think that they can't fight back. They'll take you, they'll use you, but you unite with people, you start coordinating with people, you start shielding each other, you start helping each other, you start breaking the programming, which I've heard this, and this has actually happened because of the MK Ultra that they all put us through. They use different kinds of drugs and alcohol, drugs in particular, to sublayer in our consciousness programming that was layered, that you have to peel off piece by piece by piece by piece. And once you start delaying that, and once you start finding the altars that you have, you start healing those altars and integrating those altars. And there are beings out there, benevolent beings, that will help you and that will come alongside you. And in particular, myself and other people I know will come alongside, because we need to unite. And the only way we're going to be able to beat these guys is if we deprogram, unite, and spit in their face and say no and give them the middle finger, because we're stronger than them, because they made us to be super soldiers, ultra soldiers, powerful psychics, that all they have is technology, and we can break that technology because we're the ones. We're the ones they're afraid of. We're the ones who are the opposition. We're the ones who are the resistance, and we are the reckoning. And they're scared of us, and that's why they target us, because they know one day, very soon, and even now, that we're going to rise up and take them all out.
Well said. Yeah, I just I'm really grateful for your input, but also just as just my curiosity, whether all this integration has resulted in some of your psychic abilities, like coming maybe online, kicking in real life.
Yep, kicking in real life. So the abilities that I had at Montauk that are 3D now, I have the ability. I've teleported in my car. Let's see. I'm trying to count. So 1, 2, 4, 5. So I've teleported in real time 3D about 7 times, and it usually kicks in when my life is in danger, i.e., car accidents, industrial accidents, and I can share those details as well in another interview, and I'd be happy to do that. And I've flown. I've had people see me fly. I've had people see me run really, really, really fast, and they're like, I've never seen that before. And these are just regular civilians, as well as my ex-wife, eyewitnesses and things like that. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. I'm just saying that once you start integrating your memories, and once you start healing, and once you start taking the inhibitors and the implants out of your body, then your chakras, I mean, this is on a multi-dimensional level. Like I said, it's not just physical. This is like a full integration. Your chakras align, your time points get freed, and shit starts to come online. One of my abilities, another ability I have, is to heal. I can heal people. I can perform psionic surgeries. And like I said, I have eyewitnesses, and I have people that I've worked on that I've pulled implants out of, like, not, I'd say etherically, that when I pull the implant out, like, they can feel it physically happening and it being removed, as well as healing broken bones and healing certain things in the body as well. And it's it's one of the skills I maintain from the Dracos, because this is one of their skills that they have, skill sets, in order to psionic surgeries and things like implants and healing as well. Because healing, I mean, if you're on the go, man, you got to heal yourself. You know, if you can't get to a med bed in time and you're bleeding out, you got to be able to heal pretty much instantly and quickly to get back in the fight. Mm-hmm. And they put in different pockets of injections that you can basically gland, and your glands and your adrenal glands, they enhance those in order to gland different kinds of chemicals in order to keep going, like adrenaline, you know, sometimes painkillers as well. Mm-hmm. People say very high pain tolerance. That's because we just have enhanced stuff in our bodies. They enhance us.
Right. Although even unaltered, we're all belonging to pretty special, like, soul groups anyway. That's why they're so obsessed with us and stuff.
Let me say something else as well. Okay. My group that I'm a part of, we want fairness for all. And we don't want to fight people. We don't want to fight the public. We're not here to engage humans or humanity, the civilian population, in any way, shape, or form. We are here to help them open their eyes to the truth of what I have spoken about the bigger picture, and to give them the courage to stand up and fight back and say no to the establishment, to the tyrannical governments that control the population of this planet, to every level of control, to stand up and to fight back. And to one of the ways, and people might call me a terrorist for saying this, man, and I already know they're going to come after me. I already know this. This is my declaration of war on the establishment. This is my declaration of war on the projects. This is my declaration of standing up and saying no more, because we're not here to kill people. We're here to take down the establishment. We even want fairness for the Mars Germans who are willing to come onto our side and to fight, and they will have immunity. There's going to be a lot of justice that is served out to a lot of the people responsible, but it's going to be fair and it's going to be equal to what they put into it and their willingness to change and to fix things. I will say that. We don't want the totalitarian system anymore. That's what we're here to tear down. We're here to bust those politics into pieces and to show the people the truth about the planet and their place here and what really life is about. And that is love, and that is going forward into an ascension, into a golden age where there's no more war, conflict, and the Dracos are out of our solar system and out of the universe that they invaded.
Right. And yeah, respecting the law of one and replacing competition with cooperation.
Exactly. Yes, exactly that, brother. That's exactly what it is.
Right. So yeah, I only got to like a portion of the questions, so we have to pick it up again. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks a lot for your time, and hopefully we'll meet again.
Thank you, Daniel. You have a wonderful day, and we'll definitely be in touch for sure.
Great.